Hello and welcome back to another episode of Unmissed Connections. I'm excited because we have Samantha Stone here in the studio, the founder of the Marketing Advisory Network. Now, you guys have been around since 2012, consulting work for startups, for a lot of businesses, for marketing, bringing products to market, and you've been hosting these workshops, which I got to join about a month or two ago, which was fantastic. And also, you're the author of Unleash Possible, which is available on Amazon, if I'm correct, right?
Absolutely.
And the link will be below if you want to check it out on Amazon. But thank you so much for joining. Today, what we're going to be talking about, buyer personas. How do you actually figure out who those buyer personas are? And how do you organize interviews and properly market to those folks? And so there's an ideal customer profile, which is who you want to be your customer. But that's completely different from a buyer persona, and they're confused often. Can you just describe the differences between the two?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, first of all.
This is great.
This is, not a subtle topic, right? This is a really meaty and really important topic, so I'm so glad we're getting a chance to talk about it. There really are distinctly differences between an ideal customer profile and your buyer persona, and I'm glad that you asked because people do get it confused.
Yes.
And it's a really important difference. The ideal customer profile is actually something we do before we start looking at the specific people that we want to sell to. We need to understand what market can we serve.
Sure.
And so the ideal customer profile looks at things like, if I'm selling to other businesses, what are they like? What size are they? What industry are they in? What are their use cases for how they might interact with my solution?
Yep.
I might look at geography, where can I serve? I might look at a bunch of things that you're probably familiar with that sound very straightforward.
Yep.
The magic in an ICP comes when we start going a couple layers down from that, and we start to look at things that might signal a purchase intent. And so we look at things like maybe if I sell office coffee makers, I use that as an example because we all know what that is. So if I sell office coffee maker, coffee makers, I might be looking for companies that are fast growth. So maybe one of my signals in an ICP is I want to look for companies that not only have at least 50 employees, but have a lot of job openings. So our ICP is really looking at the organizations that we're going to go after and the segment of markets that we're going to go after.
Sure.
Once we do that, we still sell to people. So now we have to figure out within that environment, who are the people that we sell to? What is their function? How are they motivated? How do they make decisions?
Sure.
And that's what a buyer persona is.
Yeah, then you find out who's actually pulling the trigger and buying what you're selling.
Exactly,
Sure.
exactly. And when you meld those two things together, then magical things start to happen with our targeting, because then we get really precise with who we're developing messaging for, who we're developing content for, and then we get really tightly around with our sales team as well.
The idea is, again, of course, who you're selling to is different than figuring out what's the target company that would best fit your solution,
Yes.
your product. Your coffee makers, of course,
Yes.
every company needs a coffee maker. And so now that we've kind of decided what the differences are between that ideal customer profile and the buyer persona, you have to ask people what they're interested in. You have to find out who those buyers are. You have to look at history. How do you actually figure out what your resonating strategy is? How do you figure out those personas? And I know at one point when we had the meeting, when I joined the workshop, we talked about the interview process.
Data is extremely important. It provides us a place to start. We can look at what content is being consumed. We can go back in the history of our successful sales environments and our losses and understand who was involved and what steps did they take and where did we lose out and all of those things. So that data tells us incredibly important things. It helps us build a hypothesis.
Yeah.
But once we have a hypothesis, we actually have to go talk to the people. I know, right? We can't be afraid. And the qualitative part of a process of developing a persona is irreplaceable. We've done a lot of research and data that shows us that organizations who exceed or meet revenue expectations are better at qualitative analysis, because having a conversation unveils things that we can't see. So data will tell us what someone does. It can tell us what they've downloaded for offers. It can tell us where they were in a sales process, but it doesn't tell us why.
Exactly, yes.
Right? And why is what we want to respond to when we're creating our content and telling our stories, because understanding the why will help us connect emotionally to our buyers, not just rationally. And even though a lot of us sell things to other businesses, we still buy emotionally.
Someone has
right?
to use it, yeah. Just because
Right?
you're selling a software product to a
Right.
company doesn't mean that it's the company that's using it. People are using it for that company. That's how it works.
You're exactly correct. People are using it. People are interacting with it. People are prioritizing it over other things.
Sure.
So how do we create an emotional connection to those folks that also is lined with rationale?
Yeah.
So on the rational side of the discussion, what are the things that are not just features of our solutions, but are going to align to the things that are motivating for our buyer? And then how do we align our solution to what they already believe are their top priorities?
No, that makes sense. So to find these folks, I mean, you kind of have to have an idea of who would be using. If you have your ideal customer profile, whether you've done this before or not, you've had some sales. Do you look historically first to help identify who you're actually bringing into these conversations, or not surveying, but interviewing? How do you find those people to interview?
That's a really great question. So certainly you want to look at where you've had success so far.
Sure.
So you definitely want to look back and talk to some of your customers. But here's where a lot of people make the mistake. They rely too much on who I've already had success with, which is a very limiting factor, because it may be exactly the right people, but it may be almost by mistake. It may be because, right? It may be because I have a salesperson who knows this territory really well and has a lot of personal relationships. And so we want to make sure that you talk to buyers, and you start with the people you know, and you have them map the process, and they will identify other people involved in the buying process than we might have engaged with, because there's a lot of people that salespeople never talk to because they're behind the scenes, right? So step one is to do that. Then step two is to go talk to a bunch of people who are your target buyers, and go through the same process with them and understand that, and have those same types of in-depth conversations that you would with your existing customers.
I am very sorry to interrupt this episode, but Samantha and I had so much good content to talk about, we had to split this episode into 2 parts. So go ahead and click in the description below to watch the next part of this episode, where we talk directly about facilitating that interview process, what questions you should ask, if you should be giving compensation or not, and what do you do with all that data after you capture it. It's a lot of tangible data. So go ahead and click in the description below to find the next part of this episode.